Hey everybody, so different type of video today. I wanted to talk about the road to the worldwide transition that we're currently in War of the Visions. And I wanted to talk about a specific aspect about it that nobody has really talked about. Most people probably don't even know that it even exists. Um, I think a lot of us are feeling a little bad about it because they specifically announced that they were going to try to do the best to make it as easy as possible. And it feels like they're kind of lying to us, and we haven't really seen a lot of what they were promising that they were going to give us. And on top of that, one of the things that they told us that they were going to give us is actually something that JP already has. So it kind of just doesn't really make sense in terms of how they're helping to ease our transition into the worldwide version. So before we get into anything, I sort of just want to establish something, and we're going to do that by looking at one of the clips between Justin and Hiroki. So as we usually get an announcement from Justin or Hiroki, there's a certain behavior that they always do at the beginning and at the end of all their videos. So take a look.
Hello, everybody.
Hello,
Greetings.
everyone. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Hiroki.
That's going to do it for us. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Alright, so there you have it. It's basically Hiroki and Justin both saying hello and goodbye. But you guys can usually tell that Hiroki is like super enthusiastic and he seems like a super friendly guy, almost to the point where it's like he's almost like a cartoon character type of person. The thing with that is that is actually a very Japanese thing to do. In Japanese culture, politeness is like the utmost important thing that you can do in society. So just as another example, I'm going to go into a few clips here so that you can kind of see something that looks pretty similar. So let's take a look at
Oda is always thankful to her guests. This sense of gratefulness is what keeps her going. And she always watches and waves until departing guests have passed completely out of sight, before turning away and going back into the ryokan.
Okay, so that was a video of some hotel guests leaving the hotel on a bus. And from what you can see, pretty much the whole staff is out there waving at the bus, saying goodbye to the customers. And even you can see at the end, the bus kind of rounds the corner and then they start bowing. And it's like at that point where they've already rounded the corner, I don't think really most of the people on the bus could even see that the bowing is taking place. But it's customary to kind of just do that, even just to do it, even if it's not necessarily even being seen. So I have a couple more clips which are from both from another video. So let's take a look at those. All right, so in those clips, the first one you can see that the guy is leaving the restaurant and the waiter kind of walks out with him to the entrance area and kind of, says goodbye, waves and bows. And in the second part of that, the guy is walking out to his car. So you see the valet, he's holding the door open for him. He bows and then he waits for him to leave. And then he bows again as the guy's kind of rounding the corner. And he's probably not even looking back to see if he bows again. So why do the Japanese people do this? It's because it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of politeness. Basically, when you are going to somebody's business and you're spending money there, you basically have to do your best to show that they're super welcome, that you're treating them nice, that you basically know all the polite rules of Japanese culture, basically. In Japan, it seems to me that following these like unspoken rules of being super polite and being super welcoming is actually more important than if you were to lie to the customer or tell them the truth or anything like that. I feel like this is where we are running into this issue with us, between us and Gumi, where they're basically essentially lying to us in a certain way, but they're sort of just being super friendly about it. Mainly Hiroki, because he's the one that we're interacting with. He's trying to be like super friendly about it and super, promising us good things, that type of thing. All right, so along with these examples, you've probably heard a lot about Japanese people, how they're super polite, super friendly, right? They're super clean. In terms of garbage, they're really on point when it comes to cleaning everything up. You've probably heard that in Japan, there's like no crime and stuff like that. But what I'm here to say is that basically this politeness and this like really nice society that is in Japan, it kind of comes with a pretty high cost. I'm going to go into a little bit of my own personal experience. Now, if you don't know, I lived in Japan for about a year, most of 2022 and a little part of 2023. I was basically living and working in Japan. And what I was able to do is I was able to experience Japanese culture firsthand as a person that is not not from Japan, not of Japanese descent. And one thing I gotta say that you probably are going to be surprised about is that I experienced a lot of confusion, struggles, and misunderstandings in my time there. There was a lot of times where I felt bad and I felt like people hated me, and honestly didn't feel like people were super friendly towards me. And as I'm hearing people talk about this road to the worldwide transition and how Gumi's essentially lying, and it just doesn't feel bad to like be told one thing and then something else is happening, it kind of triggers a memory in my mind of myself living and working in Japan and what I experienced there. So let me get into that a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into it because I want to keep it about War the Visions. But when I first got there to Japan, it was like, my first 2 weeks were like super nice. They hooked me up with like a translator and everything. And, I had to get all my documents and everything in order. And, that was a pretty nice experience. You get to see a lot of the workers like being super respectful. And, the translator was super respectful, super nice to me. And I was nervous to start my first day at work. I was working as an English teacher. And a lot of the staff there did their best to like introduce themselves to me, like be super nice, be super welcoming and super warm. There was a Japanese English teacher who was translating, but like a lot of people was helping to translate, but a lot of people were kind of, trying to use their best English to kind of make me feel welcome at this. It was a school. So I basically went to 3 different schools. And it was basically the same thing at all 3 schools. I got to meet the principal, the vice principal, and it was really nice. To me, it was like really nice to see how Japanese people are and just get to experience it firsthand. But what ended up happening is like maybe after like a month or like a few months, I started to get like this weird feeling like people like might have a problem with me, or like there was some kind of misunderstanding, or like I did something wrong, or like something must have happened, because people's attitude completely changed with me. And so what would happen is like let's say I would get there in the morning, people wouldn't acknowledge me. I would pass people in the hall and just say like good morning or hello or something like that. No response. I felt like people were trying not to talk to me. People weren't making eye contact. And then like let's say like after I came back from a class, I came back to the teacher's room, and I would notice that people were just like acting like they were like shuffling papers around, or like pretending to do some work and just like acting busy. And it kind of just felt like they were trying to just ignore me or just not have any kind of conversation with me or anything. Which, I mean, to some extent, it's understandable because, having to speak in a second language that you're not like super good in, it could be a little bit tiring to have to do like every day, So I understood that much of it, but like aside from that, like even times where I wasn't really like trying to speak to people, I do know some Japanese, so I would try to say stuff in Japanese. But even when I wasn't trying to speak to people, I would still get like all these weird feelings. And then at a certain point, I just thought that I must have done something wrong. So I started just like looking up videos on YouTube, and I eventually figured it out. And there's like a lot of weird things that I just didn't really know about Japanese society. And I'm so glad that I learned it from all these YouTube videos. So I kind of wanted to come on here and just at least share some of those YouTube videos so that you guys can sort of like try to start understanding how different Japanese culture is. And actually, a lot of it kind of relates to this road to the worldwide transition that we're in. So let's hop into the next video so you can kind of see our next little topic here.
What are honne and tatemae? Honne refers to the words that come from the heart or true feelings, while tatemae refers to public thoughts. It is essential in Japan to be able to distinguish honne and tatemae in communication. For example, when refusing something, Japanese people would often say, "考えておきます." Tatemae is sometimes considered to be the same as lying, but strictly speaking, the purpose is different. A lie is basically a bad thing that you tell others to deceive them, but tatemae is used to communicate with others while respecting each other's differences without making them uncomfortable. In a collectivist island nation like Japan, it is believed that such a culture was born because people were expected to interact peacefully with each other without getting into trouble. I hear many people say that tatemae is scary because they don't know what Japanese people are really thinking. But there's nothing to be afraid of because they're just conveying their feelings in an offhand way to avoid direct conflict.
Okay, so he's kind of talking about here in Japan, there's two different styles of communication. Hone is more of a direct communication, and tatemae is sort of just like you don't necessarily say what you actually mean. You kind of just like almost like make up an excuse. But this tatemae communication is used pretty much all the time. The only time you would use hone or like true communication is probably with your family or with like your really close friends. But other than that, when you're interacting in society, whether it be at work, at a store, in a community gathering, like even on the street or whatever, you would always use the tatemae form of communication. So an example of tatemae is a lot of times, like let's say you're dating someone and you ask them out like, hey, let's do this. And they might say like, oh no, I'm washing my hair that day. And then, you ask them again and then maybe they ghost you or something like that. It's kind of like that. In general, it's a little bit more friendly because they will respond to you and they will keep trying to like give you an excuse. The idea is that you eventually just understand what they're saying. Like you kind of just piece it together. They won't necessarily tell you what they're thinking, but they will say certain things and you kind of just piece it together. Oh, they're kind of saying this. So this probably means that they don't want to hang out, more so than they tell you that they don't want to hang out, or however else they would tell you. So essentially what he's sort of mentioning here is that Japan is a collective nation as opposed to in the US where we're kind of individual. We kind of tend to, if somebody pisses us off, we kind of just tend to like either just like stop talking to them or just whatever. But in Japan, since it's a collective society, there's going to be times where you're probably going to need help from that person, or you're probably going to need to work together in some way. So it's probably a good idea not to get that person angry or to like cut them off or do something like that. So this form of communication was sort of created to kind of avoid confrontations and not have to deal with, like the bad emotions from other people, and you can kind of just live in harmony. So let's kind of go over what he kind of mentioned here in his little text things that he had up. Tatemae is sometimes considered to be the same as lying, but strictly speaking, the purpose is different. A lie is basically a bad thing that you tell others to deceive them, but tatemae is used to communicate with others while respecting each other's differences without making them uncomfortable. So what he's kind of saying here is that it's essentially more important to make sure that you are not upsetting or bothering the other person. It's more important to do that than to actually get your point across in Japanese culture. And then he goes on to say that Tatemae is scary because I don't know what Japanese people are really thinking, which he follows up by saying, but there's nothing to be afraid of because they are just conveying their feelings in an offhand way to avoid direct conflict. So I have a little bit of a problem with this when he says there's nothing to be afraid of. I think as people who aren't Japanese, it does feel very scary, and I think there is something to be afraid of here. I think the reason he's kind of saying there's nothing to be afraid of is because it's like he kind of said it's not bad intentions to kind of communicate with this, so don't necessarily be afraid of that. And on top of that, when you kind of notice someone Japanese is communicating with you like this, it's like you can be assured that they're trying to tell you something, but they're also trying to not upset you about it. So I think the reason he's saying not to be afraid is because it is possible to decipher what the other person or party, company, whatever, is actually saying to you. So this to me has been pretty hard to understand. After I found these YouTube videos and I kind of started to notice it more in people, first of all, my first instinct was to just reject it and be like, this is terrible. Why are these people doing this? But it literally took me like a good, 8 to 10 months to get used to it and kind of just really start to understand it. I still feel like I don't fully understand it, obviously. And, actually understanding what they're trying to say is another step even beyond that. So, yeah, I don't really expect you guys to really fully grasp what I'm kind of trying to convey here, but I kind of just want to make you guys aware that it does actually exist. So, he has another video, the same guy, where he talks about like different rules. So let's take a look at that clip right now.
Next, let's take a look at what kind of characteristics are born due to these reasons. 1. Keeping harmony is the top priority. It's more important than actual progress and development. 2. People have an advanced ability to read the air and sense relationships between people within the group.
Alright, so he kind of saying something right now that I kind of mentioned a little bit before, which is number 1 here. Keeping harmony is the top priority. It's more important than actual progress or development. So that's essentially what we're seeing right now with Gumi, where to them, it's actually more important to give us a good customer service experience, aka being friendly and be like, yeah, it's going to be a great transition. We're going to do our best to ease it for you. It's more important for them to say stuff like that than to actually deliver on what they're saying. They kind of, we'll get into that a little bit later, they kind of are delivering what they think they're trying to communicate. But as we see here in number 2, Japanese people have an advanced ability to read the air or sense the mood and sense relationships between people within a group. We as non-Japanese people, we do not have this ability. So I think the problem is that they're kind of assuming that we have this ability because it's part of their culture to have this ability to just understand what they're saying, even though they're not directly saying it. But we as non-Japanese people do not have this ability. So I definitely, this is definitely where we're kind of running into the problem here. There's a few other steps here on his little rules. I'm going to link this below if you guys want to watch the rest of the video. They're not necessarily relevant in this situation, so I'm going to stop there for now. All right, so now that we've established like at least these two principles, let's bring it back to the whole road to worldwide Giveback Festival, which is what they're calling it. I'm basically talking about those tickets that we got for the amount of viz that we spent in the game. And there's a couple of questions that I feel like I have been able to answer for myself in terms of like being able to understand what they're saying. So we were told that we were going to get these tickets, but they turned out to be the exact same tickets that they got on the JP version, and they didn't have to go through this weird worldwide transition that we're going through. You know, I was kind of hopeful that the tickets would have like a little extra bonus for our side, but they're pretty much exactly the same tickets. So I asked myself, are we supposed to believe that these tickets were exclusive to global? Like they kind of made it out to be. They didn't necessarily say that straight out, but they kind of made that out to be. But I think the answer for that was no. They're not necessarily trying to say that this is an exclusive thing for global. I think what's really happening is that Hiroki did us the favor of timing this announcement and, you know, the transition and everything, even though it technically started a little bit earlier, of timing the announcement to align with the tickets so that at least we wouldn't have that much of a hard time with, you know, we were able to get star shards and mog medals out of it. So at least we'd have a little bit easier time to build our units that we're pulling for, assuming people pulling for units. One of the other things that he mentioned was that he was talking to the other people in the team and about whether or not they would cut characters. And he said, no, we're not going to cut any characters. I think this is the better path. I think part of it too was that he did us the favor of not cutting out characters. And obviously, I think people would have been more mad if they cut out certain characters. Or like, let's say, you know, they would have cut out your favorite character out of this. I think people would have been more upset. Because, you know, maybe not everybody's going to pull for all the characters, but how can you tell who is whose favorite character? You can't really do that. So he decided to just leave all the characters in for collection purposes. So basically, he did us the favor of doing that. So I think that was pretty much it in terms of what they were kind of trying to convey, is that they kind of just helped align the tickets, and they sort of just did us the favor of including the characters. They're not necessarily saying that they did anything special for us. They're basically trying to just point out the positives of it, even though it's gonna be a little bit of a tough transition for us. All right, guys, I'm going to end it there. I had a lot more to say, but I think it's going to be better for me to break this out into parts, because I feel like this video is going to be like an hour and a half long, and then that way you guys can just watch it however you can watch it. So I'm going to definitely include links to these videos in the description or wherever I can fit them, and I will see you guys in the next video.